All right, good afternoon. I will start off obviously with an update on our Secretary General, who is landed a few hours ago in Baku in Azerbaijan, where he is attending the 29th meeting of the Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, better known as COP29. Today, he met with the President of Azerbaijan, President Aliyev. He expressed his full cooperation and support for the presidency to have a successful COP with ambitious results. He also met with COP President Mukhtar Babayev. Tomorrow, as he does every year, he will address the leaders during the opening ceremony of the COP, where he will remind them that unless emissions plummet and adaptation soars, every economy will face the impacts of climate change. He will urge leaders to focus to increase their efforts to slash fossil fuel production and consumption, agree with the rules for a fair and effective carbon market, and to take fundamental step changes on climate finances across the board, among other measures. In particular, Mr. Guterres will have a message for G20 countries, asking them to lead as they have the tools and the resources needed by all countries for climate action. Tomorrow, he will speak at the high-level dialogue on loss and damage and Africa's Green Momentum event. He will also meet with various leaders who are attending COP29. Moving to the situation along the blue line between Israel and Lebanon, I can tell you that our peacekeeping colleagues are continuing to follow with concern the exchanges of fire between the Israel Defense Forces and Hezbollah. The increasing impacts on civilians is of grave concern, and we condemn the ongoing loss of lives that we have seen. Parties to the conflict must adhere to international law and protect civilians as well as civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, our Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, is heading to Lebanon. He will begin tomorrow a 3-day visit to the country. During that visit, Mr. Lacroix's priorities include expressing solidarity and support for peacekeepers, troop-contributing countries, and other partners, as well as the communities served by our peacekeeping mission in Lebanon. He will amplify calls by the United Nations and the international community for de-escalation and a cessation of fire. In Beirut, Mr. Lacroix will meet, or schedule at least, to meet with senior Lebanese officials, including with the caretaker Prime Minister, Najib Mikati, the Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, the caretaker Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdullah Habib, as well as the caretaker Ministers of Defense, Maurice Slim, the head of the Lebanese Armed Forces, General Joseph Aoun, as well as members of the diplomatic corps present in Beirut. Mr. Lacroix is also scheduled to visit the headquarters of the UN peacekeeping mission in Nakora in southern Lebanon, as well as other positions along the Blue Line to meet with the UN mission leadership and, of course, meet with peacekeepers themselves and personally thank them for their dedication in carrying out their work under extremely difficult conditions. Meanwhile, on the humanitarian front in Lebanon, we and our partners are continuing to support the Ministry of Public Health by distributing medicines to some 40 primary health centers across the Bekaa and the Baalbek Hermel governorates. The World Health Organization and its partners are also providing support to areas impacted by the conflict, such as Baalbek, Nabatea, and South governorates, where facilities have either limited capacity due to hostilities or healthcare workers have been forced to move. For its part, as of yesterday, the World Food Program delivered millions of cooked meals. They've done so since September 23rd of this year, reaching more than 440,000 people across Lebanon. The conflict has devastating impacts on civilians on both sides of the Blue Line. OCHA underscores that under international humanitarian law, parties to the conflict must take all feasible precautions to avoid and minimize harm to civilians and civilian objects. Civilians, including children, must be protected at all times, wherever they are, whether they choose to stay in an area or whether they are forced to flee. Our humanitarian colleagues also tell us that the total number of child fatalities in Lebanon since October of last year jumped to more than 200. Over the weekend, a strike in Byblos on Mount Lebanon Governorate killed at least 23 people, including 7 children, in a home sheltering displaced people. That's what the Lebanese Public Health Ministry is told our colleagues on the ground. Turning to the situation in Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that access to North Gaza Governorate is still extremely limited. Over the weekend, our colleagues were unable to enter the area. OCHA is worried about the fate of Palestinians remaining in North Gaza as the siege there continues and urgently calls on Israel to open up the area of humanitarian operations at the scale needed, given the massive needs, as you well know. In a new report published today, our OCHA colleagues tell us that in October, humanitarian organizations submitted 50 requests to the Israeli authorities to enter North Gaza Governorate. 33 of those requests were rejected outright, and 8 were initially accepted, but then faced impediments along the way. Attempts to coordinate the evacuation of one of our injured UN colleagues from the Jabalia area was also denied, with Israeli authorities suggesting that this person could attempt to be carried out on foot by relatives waving white flags to identify themselves. Humanitarian access to northern Gaza broadly has also been extremely limited. In October, OCHA registered 98 attempts to coordinate movements to the north via checkpoints along Wadi Gaza. 85% of the requests were denied. Over the past 3 days, teams led by OCHA alongside other humanitarian colleagues, as well as the UN Human Rights Office and the UN Mine Action Service, have been assessing the needs of hundreds of displaced families across 9 sites in Gaza City, including people who were newly displaced from North Gaza. The sites included both UNRWA and public schools, makeshift sites, abandoned structures, and a sports stadium. The teams say that some displaced families have sought to shelter in abandoned homes or destroyed clinics, while others were staying out in the open in streets or open fields where they're exposed to elements. In one location, more than a dozen families, including people with disabilities and those in urgent need of medical care, were found sheltering in the basement of a severely damaged structure. The space lacked electricity and was full of sewage. For those staying in schools, conditions are also dire. There's nowhere near enough bathrooms to support the people sheltering there, and many people are forced to relieve themselves in the very locations where they sleep. Those displaced say that they're afraid of stray dogs at night as the schools lack secure walls. The assessment team said that urgent assistance is needed, including medical treatment and essential medications. Palestinians in Gaza also need blankets, warm clothing, shoes, shelters, heaters, fuel as winter approaches. Tarpaulins and food resistance tents are needed to protect displaced families against the weather. The sewage system also needs repair, and a reliable supply of safe drinking water is essential to improve sanitation and to avoid the spread of waterborne diseases. Turning to the situation in Syria, our humanitarian officials are sounding the alarm over the lack of financial resources needed to respond to the needs of people in the country. In a joint statement issued a short time ago, our resident and humanitarian coordinator for Syria, Adam Abdelmullah, as well as the regional humanitarian coordinator for the Syria crisis, Ramantham Balakrishnan, warned that with less than 2 months left in the year, the humanitarian response plan for Syria is only just over 27% funded, with only $1.1 billion received of the 4.1 actually needed. This comes at a time where 2 out of every 3 people in Syria are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, the emergency appeal launched in September to support hundreds of thousands of people arriving in Syria from Lebanon is also severely underfunded, with just $32 million out of the $324 million that is needed. Mr. Abdelmullah and Mr. Balakrishnan called on the donor community to significantly and urgently increase support for humanitarian efforts in Syria, warning the cost of inaction would be enormous. And turning to Ukraine, our colleagues from Humanitarian Affairs also inform us that according to Ukrainian authorities, attacks over the past 5 days across the country have resulted in more than 100 civilian casualties, including children, and widespread damage to civilian infrastructure. Our humanitarian colleagues note that deadly attacks in Zaporizhzhia on Saturday, the second in 5 days, caused dozens of casualties, including children. The attack destroyed a number of residential buildings. Authorities also report an increase in drone strikes in the south of the country, especially in the regions of Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Kherson, leading to scores of civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure, as well as which includes heating and gas facilities. Aid workers have responded swiftly, providing hot meals, materials to cover damaged windows, blankets, solar lamps, and hygiene kits, as well as cash and psychosocial support. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that in some frontline communities, basic food is becoming scarce as many shops have stopped functioning. To address this, the World Food Program has supplied ovens, dough kneading machines, and generators, among others, to 14 bakeries in 6 of the war-affected regions of Ukraine. In September alone, those bakeries produced more than 500,000 loaves of bread for their communities near the front lines. A note on Haiti that I want to share with you in light of the latest political developments. The Secretary General urges all Haitian stakeholders to work constructively together to advance the political transition as agreed upon on March 11th in Jamaica. Overcoming their differences and putting the country first remains a critical to that end. The Secretary General appeals to all member states to sustain and increase their security support for Haiti, including through multinational security support mission, ensuring that it receives the financial support it needs to successfully implement its mandate and expand deployment and operations. On that note, Virginia Gamba, the Special Representative for Children in Armed Conflict, issued a statement today warning that children are at the heart of the crisis in Haiti and particularly vulnerable to armed gangs. Her office estimates that between a third and a half of armed gang members are children under the age of 18. She added that the recent trends in Haiti concerning sexual violence against children, particularly girls, are deeply alarming, with verified UN figures showing an increase of 41 cases last year to over 400 in 2024. Ms. Gamba urges all parties in Haiti to do everything they can to prevent grave violations against children. She also calls on gangs to immediately release children from their ranks and hand them over to civilian child protection groups. And on Sudan, just a quick note that the World Food Program in Sudan tells us that a convoy of WFP trucks crossed the border from Chad through Adre, and they were heading to Zamzam IDP camp in North Darfur, where, as you know, famine was confirmed this year. The trucks are carrying vital food and nutrition supplies for about 12,500 people. WFP emphasizes that this assistance must reach desperate families in Zamzam camp safely and quickly. WFP underscores that the Adre corridor is a vital lifeline to get urgent assistance to the hands of desperate families across the Darfur region. Through this crossing, WFP has now transported over 5,600 metric tons of food and nutrition supplies, which is enough for nearly 500,000 people, and that was done in just 3 months since August 20th. It is crucial that the crossing remains usable and open for humanitarians to ramp up aid and get a steady supply of aid to communities facing extreme hunger. Meanwhile, WFP also contributes to get food into the hands of people facing famine in Zamzam through a network of local retailers under contract with WFP. With this approach, WFP has so far supported 100,000 people out of the 180,000 men, women, and children the agency plans to reach in Zamzam. And lastly, just want to flag that our colleague Leonardo Santos Shimao, the head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, is in Chad starting today until 16 November. He's there to take part in the 15th meeting of envoys and representatives of the Sahel, which is taking place today and tomorrow in N'Djamena. He will also undertake a joint high-level visit to countries of the Lake Chad Basin with Abdou Abari, the head of our office in Central Africa. The mission aims to reaffirm our support to Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Nigeria's effort to fight terrorism. Deji.
Never expect to be the first one. Just now you mentioned OCHA's numbers to northern Gaza. You said 50 requests, which 33 has been rejected, 8 encountered impediments. So not only 9 deliveries into northern Gaza. Is that correct?
If you can do the math.
I
as well
tried
as
to do the math.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the reason to deny, and what are the impediments for those?
Well, the impediments are sometimes that things take too long at checkpoints, right? Which means that at some point we have to go back because the day is ending and it's not safe to work at night. And other impediments are logistical, but as to why they're denied, I mean, that's a question to ask the people who are denying it.
Related
not
to UNRWA?
Again, those are questions you have to ask to those people who are denying the missions, not to us.
Okay. Has the Secretary General ever talked to the new Foreign Minister of Israel via phone, even though he's not persona non grata?
He has not spoken to him. I know our colleague Sigrid Kaag was recently in Jerusalem, where she met a number of officials.
So the minister said today that when talking about the Palestinian state, he denied it. He said, in a word, no. And he said creating a Palestinian state today would be tantamount to creating a Hamas state. What is the response from the UN?
Our response is that our position remains unchanged. We continue to believe that a two-state solution with two states living in peace and side by side is the only way forward.
Has Ms. Kaag talked to the new minister about this?
I think our position has been repeated umpteenth time. It is not a mystery, and it is pretty clear. Edie, then Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Steph. First, a follow-up on the Haiti statement. You never mentioned Prime Minister Conille by name. Does the Secretary General support his staying in his current position?
Look, it's not for the Secretary General to choose who will be the Prime Minister of Haiti. We've seen what's happened to our former colleague, Mr. Conille. What is important is that Haitian political leaders put the interests of Haiti first and foremost.
And on Sudan, on Adre, yes, WFP made a big plea for it to remain open, but what specifically is the UN doing to ensure or try to ensure that it actually does remain open?
Well, we continue to be in touch with the Sudanese authorities to make that point clear. And right now it's staying open, so we're happy that it's staying open. Abdelhamid, then Amélie.
Thank you, Stéphane. The Arab Islamic Summit held in Riyadh, I think the SG did not participate. Why he didn't go and address the Arab Islamic Summit, and if he didn't, which we know he didn't, was he represented in that
There is no UN representation there. I'm not aware that there was an official invitation sent out. We continue to support all efforts towards the goal of immediate de-escalation in the region, including Lebanon, ceasefire in Lebanon and ceasefire in Gaza, and the unconditional release of all hostages in Gaza. For the Secretary General, he underlines the importance of ending the occupation, urgency of and implementing the long overdue two-state solution, which Deji raised a few minutes ago. We will continue to support all efforts towards that goal, including the summit that's taking place today in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. Yesterday morning, there was an attack on the Hayy Sayyida Zainab district in Damascus. 7 people were killed, 15 were wounded. Why the UN led these major incidents, violation of the Syrian sovereignty, with no statement or condemnation?
I mean, we're aware of a number of airstrikes that took place in Syria, notably in Said Zainab, as you mentioned. We continue to remind all parties to respect their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, and to respect the sovereignty of countries. Amélie, Gabi, Stéphane.
Thanks, Steph. Just a follow-up on the Adre border crossing. If I'm not mistaken, the authorization that SAF gave was for 3 months and is ending at the end of this week. So do you have any kind of clear indication from them that they're going to keep the border crossing open after the end of this week?
We very much hope that it will continue to operate, and contacts are being had in that direction. Gabriel.
Thanks, Steph. A month ago, the United States gave Israel a 30-day deadline to bring in 350 trucks of aid to Gaza a day. My question is, are you guys seeing anything close to that getting into Israel right now? Getting into Gaza right now, I'm sorry.
Close to that? No.
Have you, for the last month, seen anything close to that?
We continue to see is not enough humanitarian aid going in. I mean, the last data that I've been given, that between the 1st and the 7th of November, 480 truckloads of humanitarian aid was able to be picked up from the crossings in Gaza, which includes Erez West, Karim Shalom, and so-called Gate 96. That level is nowhere near what we need to support the more than 2 million civilians.
And one on Haiti, a follow-up. This nine-member presidential council basically fired the prime minister. I mean, the fact that they can just do that so quickly, what does that put, let's say, the UN in trying to have some stability in the work you guys are doing there, knowing that something can change so quickly?
The structure in place is the structure in place, right? That was agreed upon, if I'm not mistaken, in Kingston. That was agreed upon by the Haitian party. What Haiti needs, among many things, is stability, political stability, and needs political leadership that puts the interest of stability, the interest of humanitarian aid, the interest of a return of law and order first and foremost. Stefano, and then we'll go online. I think Pam has a question.
Thank you, Stéphane. President-elect Trump chose Congresswoman Elise Stefanik as the next ambassador. Any reaction from the Secretary General? And did you notice that Stefanik, when Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Accord, she actually criticized the president and said that shouldn't have done that?
Look, it's not for us to react. Member states will appoint, leaders of member states will appoint their representatives, and we will work constructively with the permanent representative of the United States, just like we do with every other country.
Does it look like it's a good signal, that at least on the climate change issue, this new ambassador is kind of sensitive to the issue?
I will leave the interpretation of smoke signals or any other signals to the journalists.
And then another one, President-elect Trump chose Tom Homan as the so-called czar for immigration issue for the borders. And he already declared more than once that how he's going to organize the deportation of millions of migrants. Is the Secretary General concerned about this issue?
There's a lot of speculation, right? There's a lot of things going on. We deal with one administration at a time in any member state. The Secretary General's positions on the issues of the rights of migrants and refugees is well known, has been unaltered for a long time. We will speak to and comment on things once they happen, if they happen. Pam.
Thank you very much. My question's been asked. Thanks, Steph.
Okay. Deji, then Edie.
So another President-elect Trump question. A Wall Street Journal reported that his team actually drafted a proposal on Ukraine that would freeze the bid of Ukraine to NATO for 20 years, as well as to freeze the front line of current Russia-occupied place. So my question is, do you think this is in line with UN's position, which is to have a peaceful solution, a just and peaceful solution of Ukrainian crisis in line with the international law, UN Charter, and relative UN resolutions?
Deji, you've been in New York for some time. I'm sure you can find a foreign policy expert to answer that question for you. It's an analysis question. It's not for me to answer. Our position, again, is clear and well stated.
I mean,
I will let you and analysts and experts make the links, the speculation, the projections. I can only speak to what our position is, and I'm definitely not going to start to speculate on things that may or on reports from the media. Edith Letter, Associated Press.
Thank you, Steph. On the 480 trucks that were picked up from the crossings, do we know where those trucks went to? I would be stating the obvious if I told you they went to various humanitarian points in Gaza. But we'll try to get you something a little more useful. Like how many to the north?
For the use of the Associated Press.
Thank you.
Okay, on that note, Evelyn, yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Stéphane. I just want to remind everyone that we're having a party at 5 o'clock today.
Okay.
In the Uncle Room to say goodbye to the 4 Dag Hammarskjöld fellows who are leaving on the 19th. So join us.
Thank you.
You too, Steph.